we've got Dave Weigel on with us. He is, I think, money manager is the right term, but also you have been involved in quite the laborious divorce yourself. And I actually wanted to talk to you. You made a video and you related it to the Department of Government Efficiency. Am I right? What's happening with you? Am I right?
Yeah. These things seem to be kind of coming together here. I saw on the Jon Stewart show an answer to a question we've all been asking, and that is like, who is at the top of this food chain?
Mm-hmm.
Who is, his job is to investigate,
Mm-hmm.
this stuff. And I don't know if it was an uncomfortable response by Sally Yates because Jon Stewart was just like, well, that was a rhetorical question, but she outright said it was this gentleman, Michael Horowitz. And
Mm-hmm.
I just found it poignant that she specifically said, it's his job to investigate fraud and misconduct in the criminal justice system. I thought it was so poignant that it was
Well,
just so
how
specific.
is what's happening to you? How does that connect to the what do you hope the Department of Government Efficiency does in relation to what you've discovered?
Well, I mean, that's a great question because I think everyone's natural inclination when they get wrapped into something like this is my case, my case, my case, my case. And what
Mm-hmm.
I've learned over 13 years is it's not my case. Okay. It's the same playbook they're using
Mm-hmm.
around the country. I analyze business models for a living. Okay. I
Mm-hmm.
analyze the inputs of what makes someone reach in their pocket and pay money. Okay, and looking at the entire feedback loop between all these motivational factors, and it blows my mind to see it's like 10 tactics they're
Mm-hmm.
using over and over and over. So the answer to your question is that is I don't see this as a corrupt couple of individuals in my particular case. The bigger issue is that this is a business model. It's not being talked about enough as a business model. And
Mm-hmm.
it's it's
But
it's
what
the
can
combination of my world and their world, I think, makes sense.
what can the Department of Government Efficiency do to fix it? What do you hope they do?
Well, that's a very great question there because it's a seismic shift thing. It's they know what's going on. There's no possible way I can know of 60 cases, from a layman's perspective without them knowing. So the question is, what comes first? Okay. The laws changed so that the regulators have the ability to do their job. It's the
Mm-hmm.
chicken and the egg, kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing here. And I think we're at a point here where, Mike, I've analyzed and looked at how they have in this system, every angle has been fine-tuned and purged from the system, from individuals in specific roles to tactics. They've thought of every single angle to keep this going, and it's at critical mass now. The one thing that they haven't figured out is how to shut up free speech. They have not figured out how to shut up free speech.
Now,
And I think
you
that's the way.
you honed in on Title 4D right there. That's in the article. So, what is Title 4D? What do you think that doggy can do with Title 4D that will help people like you and help the system? What's going on with Title 4D?
Yeah, great. Because the whole thing is, God, Dave, I heard this in the beginning. What are you going to go up against the whole system and be successful? Yeah,
Mhm.
I realize how ridiculous that sounds. You're going to get laws changed. What's the road to getting laws changed with something that is this entrenched? So, I mean, just seeing how I mean, it's very, very unique. Someone like an Elon Musk is brought into government to begin with. Very unique that they have a government efficiency and we've been talking about the national debt since I was 5 years old. Okay.
Right.
To even
It was
have a
only a
Department of Government
trillion
efficiency.
dollars when Ronald Reagan was president, and that seemed like a lot of money.
All right.
So,
Yeah, I remember
right.
when in 2008, 2009, the amount of very intelligent investors I knew that went 40, 50% gold, thinking that we were going to debase the currency because of $800 billion. That's a
Mhm.
monthly interest payment on our debt
Right.
right now.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
um,
But
so
what can we
I
do?
thought
What,
the
so explain what is Title 40 and what can Doggy do with Title 40 and how will it help everyone if they do it?
I think it's not. I think it's 9D, and I'm not an expert in this, but my
Mhm.
understanding is that, and this is entrenched that Bill Clinton in 1998 signed into law, okay, the Deadbeat Fathers Punishment Act, which
Mhm.
was, the typical like a fraud. Okay, it doesn't do what the
Right,
name
right,
says
right,
it's supposed to do. All
right,
it does is provide this revenue stream, this business model to go and arrest. I think you wrote the article, a
right.
gentleman in
I'm
Maryland,
one of them. Many,
28
many,
arrests, 28 dismissals. When are we going to wake up and say, what the F is going on here?
right. So what Title 4D does is it provides incentives from the federal government to the state government to go after those who are behind on their child support. So what it provides incentive to do for the state government is to create as many situations as possible for someone to be behind. So there's an incentive for a judge to make your child support something they know you can't pay back. So that way the state can go use federal funds to get you to pay back something they know you can't pay back.
Exactly.
Uh, that is what, if that was eliminated, you would eliminate all sorts of money flowing into the system. You would stop the incentive for judges to make unreasonable child support. As my friend Ronald, I can't remember his last name. He said this right. What child support does is it monetizes custody.
Right.
So by having all of these incentives for child support, it monetizes custody. So it gives people a financial reason to fight for custody where they normally wouldn't, either because they want to collect child support or because they don't want to pay it. So by creating all of these incentives, you are making a financial decision which should actually be free of finance. Deciding who is the fitter parent should not have it. Some of it is financial because obviously if one parent is barely working and the other parent is flush with cash, everything else being equal, the flush with cash parent is fitter because they
Mhm.
can provide more
Understand
financial.
Mike, there's a bit of Heisenberg in there because by measuring the atoms and putting them in this family court experiment, it changes the game. So the parents
Right, but
that
look
could
in
family
in
court support
in
their children
your
and do everything
in
else. Oh, you're a bad parent because you can't pay for the GAL and you can't pay
right,
for this expert and you can't pay for your lawyer. So you're the bad parent. So that's what this.
correct
And
and
I think
the
they properly
the
properly identified a minimum of $3.6 billion like day
right
one savings
in
if
in
we fix this.
your
But
in
I think
your
it's a lot,
case,
Mike. I think it's a lot bigger
right.
because I think that look at what this does. Now we have and Dave's talked a lot about it. We have the debtor's prison in family courts. You have
Right, we
fathers
do.
that are being thrown
What are we?
into
What are we?
jail.
Nicaragua? What are we?
Yeah,
Right,
Nicaragua?
and Dave, I'd
right.
like to
And
ask you
we'll
a little
talk about
bit.
your case, but I've talked with many people. Chris Mackney, who I wrote a book about, spent 6 months in jail for unpaid child support. Dr. Carlos Rivera, who was making tons of money, but the way they structured his child support, even the tons that he was making wasn't enough. And as far as the incentive, you do well for yourself. So there's an incentive for the court to make you the non-custodial parent because then they can say, well, based on this income,
Exactly.
here's how much you should be paying the other
Exactly.
side. And it incentivizes for the custodial parent to not work because you're going to be paying for it in your case. And you're not the only case. It, it provides all sorts of financial incentives to to do things that you normally wouldn't do. Child support, I mean. As far as custody is concerned, Ron was right. It absolutely monetizes custody. It's a horrible idea. But Dave, you've gone to jail several times for unpaid bills. How did that happen? How did you wind up in Rikers for unpaid bills? How does that happen?
Yeah, never for unpaid bills. I've been whistleblowing about it before it happens to just say
Mm-hmm.
this is what they do is
Mm-hmm.
they set up a fraudulent amount. They've never done financial discovery. In 7 years in the courts, no financial documents ever been looked at. They've literally picking a number out of the sky. So
To say that you should pay this monthly.
Yeah, but I'm just outing it before it gets to that point because I've seen it in so many other cases and hoping to sit there and say, this is what they're doing, this is how the scam works, and trying to maybe head it off before it actually happens. But I was arrested 5 times, all for a violation of a restraining order. I was told by my attorney, Dave, if your ex comes over your house and lights your front door on fire and you open the door to throw water on it to put it out and you see her, you're going to jail. Why?
Right.
Because there's a business model involved. There's a business.
Now, I mistook what you went to jail for. So you were actually the victim, and I saw it earlier, of the silver bullet divorce strategy. So you had a frivolous, a specious protective order put onto you, and then it was weaponized by your ex trying to get you violated so you could be thrown in jail so she could then take that into custody and say, Dave is a dangerous guy. He should have as little time with the children as possible. Does that sum it up in general terms? Is that what happened?
Exactly right.
I know this because, one, it happened to me, and because I have written many, many stories about it. The poster child for this is Neil Shelton, who was arrested 3 times in one day for supposed violations of a protective order. His ex-wife even said, he's never hit me. That never happened. He always scared me. This is in court. And now that we're divorced and all the mental issues, I'm really afraid of him. That's how she got a protective order. She said he never hit me, but I fear him.
It's such an ultimate tool, Mike. It's such an ultimate tool. When I was in Rikers, I was in a big, huge room, and I've never been so proud of myself of getting myself out of a situation there. I had to sit there and listen to a guy talk about raping an 80-year-old woman with a smile on his face while everyone's looking at me to see what kind of reaction I'm going to have. Okay. It is no joke torture. All right. But I went around the room. Half of the guys there, 50 in violent offenders prison, were there for violation of a restraining order. It's being used as a free ticket to arrest anyone. Okay. And, and it's happening. Okay. Not from my ex, from the scumbag attorneys telling them.
Right. It depends on the cop, but there are plenty of cops that they will take the allegation and it's enough. So the first thing people should know is to get a protective order. The law actually, if the judge is following the law, it's not that easy. However, there's plenty of judges who will not follow the law to the letter. And so it's rather easy to get a protective order. Now, in effect, what it is, you have to show clear and present danger. Not every state has that wording, but basically the person trying to get the protective order has to come into court and have an incident that's very recent. That's the way it's supposed to work.
Reasonable standard of threat.
Right. And then look, then it's the preponderance of the evidence. So basically it comes down to whose story does the judge believe? Your ex-wife said, Dave, I saw Dave here, and Dave said, I'm going to kill you. And you said that never happened. And who does the judge believe? It's the preponderance of the evidence. It's very easy. There doesn't need to be any more evidence. All she has to do is say you said it. And by the way, that hypothetical happens all the time. And if that hypothetical is true, you should have a protective order.
And Mike, there's a secondary thing there too. We talked about motivations of judges before. Well, what's the motivation of a judge as a political figure or an appointed figure? They're sitting on the bench. They can tell the man, oh, well, either A, we're going to let you go and I'm going to take the chance that this woman's correct, or we're going to put him through. We're going to send him to the system, and then he's going to have an appearance date. He's going to be on his best behavior no matter what. And politically, I'm not going to take any hit no matter what happens because I put him in jail. So it's always going to be number 2 to a judge. A judge politically, as a political actor,
there's a notorious
putting the man through the system every time. 99.9 times out of 100.
And it's primarily the man who is the target of these false restraining orders. There's a notorious case, Baby Aiden with two A's, Aaden. Baby Aiden's mom went to court. Judge Pincus, a judge out of Connecticut, she told him that my ex, his father, Aiden's father, is a threat. She came up with what should have been enough. Judge said no, and within a week, Baby Aiden is dead. Judges don't want to be Judge Pincus. They would rather err on the side of caution. So if a woman primarily comes in and says, my ex has been threatening to kill me, they don't want to be the judge who said no, and then your ex does kill you, and now you didn't grant the protective order. They'd much rather grant the protective order, you don't do anything, because nobody's going to do a story that you grant protective orders like they're candy. Nobody's going to do that story.
Well, if you sit there and follow the money, if you follow the money at each juncture, okay?
And by the way,
if judges do their job, there's no problem.
Right.
You know?
And I'm gonna
if judges do their job, there's no problem. My restraining order, Mike, says he looked like he was going to hit me. Okay.
And that's enough. Now I have a story though. Now, before we get this up, now this pile of money that you're talking about related to restraining orders is based on a law passed by the current president when he was senator, the Violence Against Women Act. This law gives local police and local courts all kinds of money to enforce restraining orders. But let me give you.
It's under the right pretense. Let me just simply say there are deadbeat dads out there, scumbags making a lot of money and not paying for their kids, and there are women getting beaten. Okay, but I think you're missing the point by hyper focusing on the individual laws. It's theatrics. Okay, there's
what
the
should
judges
we be focusing on?
can do whatever they want. We can't have a town without a police force.
Right. Now let me give you. I witnessed this, and it was a judge out of Guilford County, North Carolina. A woman came in, and she wanted a protective order, and she had a voicemail, and the voicemail was this: it was screaming, yelling, swear word, and then here's the key part: if you sell my stuff, only then sell stuff, I'm gonna burn the house down. Only throw in a swear word in between. All right. And here's what the judge did. Judge said, play that again. Did I hear an if? And it was, if you sell my stuff, only it's not stuff, and he's screaming, I'm going to burn the effing house down. And she denied the protective order because of the if. Because he's not saying he's going to burn the house down. He's saying, if you sell my stuff, I'll burn the house down. If you are following the law, and this judge was following the law, it's not that easy to get a protective order. The problem is most judges don't follow the law. By the law, that's not a clear and present threat because he's not saying he's going to burn your house down. He's basically saying, don't sell my stuff.
But it fails the 30,000 foot look. It fails a 30,000 foot look, right? You know, how did the Theranos Elizabeth Holmes. How'd she get caught? Because some journalists said, "Hold on, wait a second. You mean some community college dropout became such a genius in medical device that you need 30 years of pounding your brain with medical knowledge, but nobody's seen or tested this?" Right? All this stuff fails the 30,000 foot look. Why would a judge go out of their way to hyper focus on a nuance like that? It's not normal to say, I'll burn your house down. It's a criminal act to do that. Okay. Judges are constantly taking the other side because the other side has the motivation to pay. And this is where AI is going to come in, because when AI says 96% of the time judges are deciding against the current laws on the books for some nuance and technicality, that fails the 30,000 foot look. Okay. Normal people get this, right? But until somebody connects the dots and says at each juncture, every decision, you only have to ask one question in all of these cases. I can tell you what's going to happen in any case in the country. Answer one question. What makes more money for the system? That's the
Mhm.
answer.
Right.
And
I agree with that.
David,
So let me,
David, Mike, real quick. David, you use the term designer child trafficking to describe what's happening in the family courts. You talked about how that can explain what the economic incentives. So can you tell me what that means, designer child trafficking?
Yeah, it was a term that was coined by an activist out in California for a very similar situation happening to him, and it just struck me that the exploitation of children for profit, that I've been saying since the beginning, that they're putting the children are the number one tool for profit making. Okay, what would I pay to not abandon my children? Fucking anything. Okay,
right.
all right. There's your business model. Okay.
Right.
So designer has to
He,
do
the
with the
system
fact that
is
they've gone upstream
absolutely,
now.
the system is absolutely based on conflict. I went to a hearing yesterday or 2 days ago, and this case that the case that I had gone to, that it's like it starts with 2014. That means that they opened the case in 2014 and there's a hearing in 2024 because the court has fed the conflict.
How is that legal? Right
Right,
to a speedy trial. How is that
right,
legal? How is that not
right,
designed to
right.
bankrupt
By the way,
anyone?
as I'm watching this thing, the judge was a stickler to one of the parties. Eddie Engels kept trying to put in exhibits and evidence that she claimed was either without foundation or an example of hearsay, and so she wouldn't allow him to put the evidence in. I didn't want to stand up and scream, but it's okay that for 10 years it's going on and on and on, and here we are 10 years later. That doesn't violate any of your rules. But if God forbid Eddie wants to put in an email from his daughter saying that his mother, and the email would have shown that her mother, his daughter's mother, was on drugs while she was taking care of her, God forbid, that might be a violation of hearsay. But the 10 years that you guys have been in court, and here we are, and they're nowhere near done. All right, this thing is not done. It's 10 years, and yeah, they feed on conflict. This thing feeds on conflict. But AI, explain how you want to use AI and how is AI going to help?
Well, in my world, numbers speak everything. Okay, we get boardrooms together, and we have behavioral factors out the wazoo. There's human factors about who has the power, who's striking for power. Okay, and the ultimate arbiter is the numbers. Okay, and that's the one thing that they're going out of their way to. I learned this after the 150th act of obstruction, where in my case, they just will not look at facts. They will not accept any facts on this case. So I'm sitting and putting two and two together and saying, until it's counted up, until we ask the AI system, like in my case, I've been feeding all 6,000 files I've been keeping since 2017, right? The beauty is now, in today's day, they don't want to admit this. A divorce, 95% of it is happening over transparent means, text message, email, very little is hearsay. They're using a system on the 2% of hearsay.
They're not allowing, in the case that I followed, he was trying to put in text messages, emails, and they still called it hearsay because it's someone else's words outside of court. They still call it hearsay.
Well, they've gotten away with saying the most outlandish shit on the planet, okay?
Right.
Because, again, the biggest question is who's stopping them? I think it's a mistake to hyper-focus on the particulars here until someone walks up and says, no, I'm not showing up to court. This is not a courtroom. This is a crime scene. I put the pieces together. You're criminals. Here's the laws. Here's how you've broken the laws. Here's who you've harmed. Here's the evidence. Here's the damages.
All right, but
It's
let's get
permanent
so
public record. I'm done.
How are you gonna how do you want to use AI to fix things?
To count, right? People are now understanding that AI is a sum total of all human knowledge, right? By putting it in there, I could just, even with the transcripts, how many, just start here. How much was I allowed to speak in 6 years of transcripts?
So the AI could say that your ex-wife was speaking for 80, and I'm making up numbers, 87%. of the time, and you were 13, and you can show that that's an example of bias.
The judge, the attorney were speaking about or relevant about topics brought up by, discussed by their side. Their side had 84% of the real estate in the entire case. So even starting there, I believe there's going to be value to counting and a system that is uncorruptible. Okay, why is Bitcoin over $100,000? Because no politician can make more than 21 million. That's why. Okay, so technology can be our savior here. I've been saying this whole time, and with so many victims, I got 7 calls yesterday and 15 emails. Victims are scared to come out. But what they need to understand is once you put it on permanent public record, yes, this is permanent public record. When it's published by a card-carrying journalist, it's permanent public record. It's going to be there in 100 years. So what's going to make these people stop doing what they're doing? Okay, maybe shame. Maybe the fact that they can't go to the corner store without getting spit on.
There are people like the folks you talked to yesterday, but fewer and fewer. People are, number one, emboldened because they don't want to take it anymore. And number two, and this is the key, I think, the stigma that used to be like 15 years ago, you didn't want to talk about this because you were going through a nasty divorce. There's something wrong with you. No,
horrible.
There's nothing wrong with you. And no one thinks that you're some weirdo because you went through a nasty divorce. More people are understanding that's number one. More people are understanding that this happens. Number two, they're realizing that it's not your fault that you're going through a nasty divorce.
But the damage is real.
System's fault.
But the damage is real. You know what? Arresting me and calling me a criminal 5 times. Now I've got to earn back people's trust to say, oh, he's not a criminal. Okay, that takes
No, I agree. The damage is real, but I think 15 years ago, people didn't want to talk about this because there was
very true.
There still is, but very small. I spoke with Kenton Gerard, and his daughters have been speaking out. And Kenton lives in Glencoe, which is one of the wealthier suburbs in America. So if ever there's going to be a stigma with something like this, it's going to be in a suburb like that. And he said his daughters speaking out, they weren't pariahs. In fact, other kids their age would come up to him and say, this happened to me. The same people.
The kids are not taking it. The kids are not taking it anymore.
But the stigma is gone. I think people realize that this Ozzie and Harriet perfect life doesn't actually exist, that if you're part of a dysfunctional family, every family is dysfunctional to whatever degree, that there's no shame in this, that, and the other. And if somebody's screwing you over, expose them and don't worry about, you have to tell everyone that dad's a drunk or mom's this or dad's that. Everybody's got something in their personal life, and nobody's going to think that something's wrong with you, because the fact is every family's got a certain amount of dysfunction. That's what people are realizing. And I think as a result of that, we're getting close to the tipping point. Yes, I think some people still are afraid, but less and less, and more people are speaking out. And definitely these folks, the judges, the lawyers, the therapists, they hate that. You're right.
You can feel the groundswell. You can feel the groundswell growing here. And we are this close to putting together all of these victims in all 50 states.
The one thing that I disagree with you on, I think you need an emotional attachment to it. So you have to have specific cases, because you went to jail 5 times. You're a money manager. You're on Wall Street. You know all the big wigs. I think that it can't just be about numbers and laws and how much money is floating through the system. You have to have the audience feel the human toll of it, that you, Dave Weigel, a successful guy, were in Rikers for a bogus violation of a protective order. They need it, not just you. You know, the story I cover, Sandra Gazzini, rookie from one of the 10 wealthiest families in Minnesota, spent 6 months in jail, is now homeless. You have to have that human element for the audience to connect.
I have a point and a question for Dave. The point is that I think that what Dave is developing is ultimately valuable because he's presenting facts, quantifiable facts, and
Mhm.
that if facts that you can't argue about. You know,
Mhm.
the court spoke 25% of the time, opposing counsel spoke 60% of the time, and all that was left was the pro se
Now,
parent that was left in the
did
court. That this happened,
you
that happened. I think
you
when you see that type of inequality just in those basic numbers, you can't argue with something like that. So you begin with
now
facts rather than
how
emotion. That from there, that's an important point.
how
But
would
to David,
a
but my point to David is this. My question to David is this: you and there's a lot about your specific case and the emotions there, and you just really just hitting your head against the wall, dealing with this unethical attorney named Daniel Notes and this judge who seems, like I thought at first she was aloof, but I've come to, agree that she's an apex predator named Tandra Dawson. Can you talk a little bit about your experience to bring it back to the emotional component?
Yeah, I try to neutralize the emotional aspect of it because when you spend a lot of time in this space and you hear all the stories happening all over the country, I think they hide in just how absurd and horrible the stories are. The more insane it is, the harder it is to believe it's real. It's kind of like it's kind of the opposite. So yeah, Tandra Dawson and Daniel Notes are horrible monsters in this system that are just callous and just egregiously going forward with this money scam. And if you say boo, what turned it on me is they intercepted a private email to all of my friends saying, "Hey, listen, they're trying to take my kids away. Would you write a reference letter of me, what you know of me as a father?" But I said in that private email, okay, I'm involved in the most corrupt piece of shit in the world. And from that moment forward, it's been Operation Destroy David and violate every single law under the sun. I mean, you can't look at a page of my case without there being fraud on the other side. So,
I,
so
I got a question. How do you the AI, how does it discern from someone who is making false allegations of abuse to someone who is who is telling the truth? How would can it discern that, and how would AI discern? How would it know
I,
if
I think it's two phases here. We've got to put a crack in the foundation, okay?
Mhm.
And I believe we need to go after the low-hanging fruit. AI is not totally built out yet. It's going to take a long time to train the models to specifically be able to cross-reference things that it's pulled up to say what's a lie and what's not a lie. All right.
Mhm.
But before that, okay, just like we found the definitive smoking gun in my case, which you never have, with what little transparency exists in the family courts. Only transparency that exists is I'm nice. If I'm my own attorney, I go in like an attorney and be able to see. Only thing that you could pull up is attorney's name, plaintiff, defendant, the date
that's
of
in New
charge.
York? You're
Even
in New
with
York.
that, we were able to prove statistically impossible with a lottery system for this attorney to sit in front of two judges. So
Mhm.
I believe it's two phases. I believe in the initial phase of AI, there's
Mhm.
enough low-hanging fruit to just outright prove irrefutable fraud going on in these courts.
Mhm.
Then we need an Elon Musk or a Vivek Ramaswamy to change the laws. We are
Mhm.
at the cusp of this mountain here. It can go either way. This could just
Mhm.
be like hey kid, you gave a valiant effort there, but you changed nothing. Or we
Mhm.
get enough people to push this over the mountain. And that's why I'm saying stroke of a pen, Title 9D, get rid of it. Okay. What's
All
the
right,
easiest thing to
I
get done?
agree with you. I just wanted to point out in New York what you said about the lawyer and that's all. That's true. This is from Missouri. This is a case that I followed, but check this out. See this order? There's the order. So it's not every state is as non-transparent as New York State is. Missouri is very transparent. Let me get rid of this. In
And
Missouri,
it's not even Dave, Mike. It's not even that. If you go to New York,
Mhm.
they try to exclude you from the courtroom. You go to a family court or a Supreme Court case, dealing with divorce.
Every angle they've got figured out.
They try to not even let you walk in. As a member of the press, I sometimes get
Right.
static.
They do a little of that in Missouri, but look, I attempted.
Kathleen Waterman Marshall, the one who
Right.
Sarah Wallace is exposing.
Right. So
she's notorious. She's notorious for doing that. She has her court officer go and ask everybody in the courtroom, "Who are you? What are you here for?"
They denied 24 people.
Public courtroom.
Here's another one that the entry was done on 11/26, and there's the motion, and the entire thing is right there. It is more transparent. I watched the hearing yesterday. No one stopped me. So the transparency, it depends on the state. It depends on the locality. Technology, I think, is going to help with that. In the state of North Carolina, where I did a lot of work, 99% of hearings are recorded, and they are held with the court, and all you have to do is call. Sometimes you have to
And
pay
there's
$10.
redacting software that's been out for 20 years. Okay, so cross out the kids' names and social birth and date of birth.
Right.
It's very easy to redact.
I've put a lot of the hearings online from North Carolina. I don't know if they do that in Illinois, but look, if the state of North Carolina can figure out how to record and put onto like an electronic file 99% of hearings, then every state can do it, and they will. So the transparency is coming, and you're right. In the state of New York, your file probably has the name, maybe the name of the attorneys, maybe the motions and other things filed, but not the actual motion. But in the state of Missouri, it's different. You can see almost everything. The only way the state of Missouri can be more transparent is if they have the audio recordings right online, and you can just click the audio recording of each hearing and listen to each, and that's the way it should be. Look, divorces are private in the sense that obviously you're talking about what happened between you and your spouse, but they are not private. They are happening in court. The public has a right to know how judges treat divorces, how they execute cases, how lawyers, how therapists, how these other people. The public has a right to know that.
People are paid. That's the
look.
How people are paid. Follow the money.
It's unfortunate. I followed Kevin Costner's divorce, and it was mostly gawking at how much money he makes, how much money he's got to pay. But that's an unfortunate byproduct. But the public has a right to know how much money he was ordered to pay in child support. The public has a right to know how this court is going to figure out, because his income, he's not salaried. How does the court figure out how much income he makes? How does the court figure out of that income how much he should pay? The public has a right to know that. It was very unfortunate because every detail of his life as a result, because he's Kevin Costner, because everybody knows who he is, now is a matter of public record, meaning all of the Eon lines. And they don't care about what the judge does. They just want to gawk at it. And that is an unfortunate byproduct. But the public has a right to know what these judges are doing.
Right. But you got to stop the structure allowing people to get something for nothing. The lottery ticket, okay? It's not 1940, okay? Don't hide behind child support. My kids go to public school, okay? There's no $2 million of child support that's actually child support. Don't shroud legal fees that they can just make up any number. Okay, they can make up any number that they want. So the thing, you rob a bank. You rob a bank. You're going to put a little bit of planning in, right? You're going to put a little planning. That's a one-time payday. You break up with somebody that you've done 1,000 times in your life. You don't have to work again. Okay, right? You can't have that incentive structure. Okay, we got to go up. We've got to go to 30,000 feet and appeal to regular people who get regular common sense. And, and that's where I've made mistakes, because anyone traumatized, okay, you're going to speak to them and they're going to just dying to get everything out. Okay, it's going to be 8 hours, and you want to give them, but everyone, just no matter how nice they are, they're going to turn away at some point, right? So I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to teach people, okay, here's one of the mistakes I've made, right? This is what I painfully learned later on, right? And I do think that while you guys are doing fantastic work, you should be fighting for using what you guys have got for the right to information, okay? Getting in there, Rich, and being able to witness. You guys are doing God's work, okay? You guys are literally doing God's work right now. You should be getting the Pulitzer Peace Prize. This is Pulitzer level, okay? You change this system, and the amount of
and the system is and
the amount of horror you turn into good. I don't know that there's been a bigger move. I don't know
Right.
if there's been a
The
bigger
system is changing. 5 states have banned reunification therapy, which is an awful thing.
Yes,
And I
it's
think
proven.
50 states, and there are a lot of different laws either proposed or passed. I know the state of New York, I don't know if they passed it, but wanted to eliminate custody evaluators, which I would agree with. I would pass a law that would eliminate every single appointed third party. There'd be no more guardian ad litem, no more any of them. The judge can't appoint anyone. You want to take money out of the system, you do that. But I'd start with the removing custody evaluators. Start with that. It's starting slow, but you're seeing all around the country laws being proposed that will have a substantial effect and help the system, not fix it entirely, but have a substantial fix on the system.
Like the biggest one right now that we're talking about is Paris Hilton, talking about the Stop Child Abuse Act, and part of that is the kidnapping camps that are akin to the reunification. On a federal level, we could see reunification camps go away under the Paris Hilton Act if it's passed under the language that is being floated right now.
And she went through something like that when she was growing up, so that's very personal to her. But yeah, the reunification therapy is like those camps. It's awful. So Dave, you want to wrap it up? I think we got to get going. But anything else you wanted to add? What's your message to Elon and Vivek? What do you want them to know?
It's very simple. Okay, there's what I believe is that, look, this system is so entrenched. It's so at critical mass. Okay, it's another thing. It's not what it was 5 years ago. It's not what it was 10 years ago. And we need something seismic and something so simple that can actually happen. So I'm looking at 3.6 billion in 2022 on this one thing we know leads to fraud. Throw shit at the wall, get rid of it, strike a pen through it, see what happens there. I believe once we do that, and if we appoint a children's best interest czar in every state with the power to jail judges and attorneys who violate the law, violate their fiduciary obligation to care for America's children. I am regulated out the wazoo. We don't need to recreate the wheel. You can even take the SEC and FINRA and put them in charge of it, and they'd hit the ground running.
I don't know if I want another bureaucrat, but a lot of that I agree with. Here's some laws that if you get rid of them, you're going to sunset them. You're going to get rid of a lot of money. Violence Against Women Act, get rid of that. Fatherhood.gov, get rid of that. Social Security Title IV, B, D, and E, get rid of those three. You're taking a lot of money out of the system. It doesn't fix everything, but if you got rid of all of those, there'd be a lot less money in the system. About 40% of the problem, those laws that I just mentioned.
You tax the money and you tax something. You ignore the money and we're all just
look, this whole thing, you follow the money. I'd say 90% of the cases, the money is the driving factor. Either the person with money is buying a certain custody outcome, or the court has identified someone with money that they want to separate from the money. So I think you're in the second case, but I've also seen it the other way, with the person with money is able to buy custody, and the court is more than willing, and that's why you get rid of these appointees.
Universal. The only question is, did you land on black and get the handful of judges and attorneys in every location that are hip to this scam?
Right.
That's it. Correct. You've got good people that are silenced, that know they don't have the law and don't have the infrastructure behind them to actually put their job on the line.
And by the way,
so we need to do that.
By the way, folks, it's not just in the U.S. Throughout the Western
world,
Canada, France, Spain, Italy, England, Australia, New Zealand, they all have the same kind of a structure, the same problems.
Green criminals everywhere.
Correct. And in many of those states, it's worse because it's far less transparent. In Australia, you can't record hearings. You can't even talk about the specifics of your hearings. All you can do is talk about in broad generalities about what's happening in the courts. So it's really worse. You know, the things that we're dealing with, it's far less transparent. There are a lot of family court hearings that are on YouTube from the U.S., none in Australia, because you can't. It's illegal in Australia. So this is a global problem. We'll talk about it more. I think that's the end, guys. Thank you for being here. This is Dave Weigel, Richard Lutman,